What makes an album bad is quite subjective. However, when a general consensus is shared by many that an album sucks, it's easy to come out with reasons why. But just like a flower can bloom out of dirt, so can a good song come out of a bad album. Let's take a look at 10 good songs on bad albums. Sometimes a band makes a big swing and a miss on an album. Sometimes a band tries something way too far out of their comfort zone. Sometimes a band is awful and only puts out bad albums. But in all of those scenarios, it's still possible to find a song worth holding on to. This is not a top 10, no rankings, this is just a list of 10 good songs on bad albums. And I'm also making a rule of only one band per entry, because there are several bands on this list who have multiple bad albums with only one good song on them, and they would take up the whole list if I didn't make that qualifier. You know how these lists work, let's get to it. Green Day was in a bit of a bind back in 2012 after agreeing to a triple album release throughout the year and touring, and each album released was pretty weak. Let's be honest, this is Green Day's worst material spread through the entire 3 similar sounding albums, but on the final and least successful album tray came X-Kid, the only single that actually held Green Day in some kind of good light. In theory, it's not hard to sound exciting with how boring Trey or any of the trilogy albums are, but honestly, X-Kid is a simple Green Day song, and it's fine. The song has real meaning too about someone Billie Joe knew growing up that passed away, but also about the entire Generation X children in general. So many kids in Gen X had a hard time and not everyone was able to move on to adulthood. That is so much more impactful than 90% of the garbage on Trey or any other trilogy album. X-Kid may not be on the level of big hits from albums like Dookie or American Idiot, but honestly, it's a nice track. Billie Joe sounds good, the guitar melodies work, that chorus gets in your head, and like I said, it's simple. I would take simple, slowed down, meaningful Green Day over whatever that nightlife hot garbage was on Dose. I mean, Trace is not good, but at least it doesn't have nightlife on it, and it has X-Kid, so that's 2 things going for Trey. I'm glad Green Day has recovered from many of the situations that 2012 led to for the band, and I'm also glad Green Day has made better music since then. It's nice to get a little song like X-Kid, but you're asking a lot of fans to listen to a full album of boring to get to it, let alone 3 boring albums. Anthrax went through some tough times in the mid to late 90s as their thrash sound was dying out, band members were in and out of the lineup, and label issues were weighing heavily on the career. So when Anthrax finally was freed from their past label and released Volume 8, problems still came. The music writing just wasn't there anymore, and the John Bush era of Anthrax was not getting positive attention. Anthrax almost didn't make it out of the 90s, and Volume 8 was almost the nail in the coffin. To be honest though, the entire album was not trash. Crush is one of the heavy, loud songs with a low sound that stands out from Volume 8, thanks in big part to fantastic drumming. John Bush sounds fine here also, and the thick riffs paired with the drumming makes a great rhythm. It's definitely a standout on an album that does not stand out well. Crush doesn't get played live much, if at all, and does come from a very different era of Anthrax than the current lineup, so it makes sense. However, I can honestly say that Crush is solid, surprisingly so from an album that's so dismissed by thrash and Big Four fans. Anthrax fans usually do not gravitate towards John Bush as their favorite Anthrax era's lead singer. If there were more songs out of that era like Crush, I feel late 90s Anthrax would have been respected a bit more. Amazing drumming, strong riffs, Crush is a good thrash track buried in an album that many would be willing to forget. Anthrax rebounded, better albums came, but even in a weak Anthrax album is something strong. Oasis may be one of the best bands to talk about when you mention a group who has all-time classic albums and trash. There's no nice way to say it. After the Gallagher brothers lost their minds, the music went down the tubes. Be Here Now was the turning point from gold to garbage, but there is at least one fleck of gold in that garbage pile called Don't Go Away. The song wasn't even that successful around the world, or at least as successful as Oasis and their label would have hoped. Honestly, it's a good Oasis song. The guitar work is great, Liam sounds good, the acoustic guitars are peaceful but not slow or boring. There are great elements in this track. It's over 4 minutes and has a strong build. This feels more reminiscent of material on What's the Story Morning Glory, as opposed to inane ramblings and drunken anger that Oasis would be known for in most of their later music. Don't Go Away is a song I think both Gallagher brothers should be proud of, even if both of them have wildly different opinions on the album overall. Liam being proud of it and Noel thinking it's bland and garbage, blaming drugs and infighting during the recording. Be Here Now marks the downturn of Oasis for sure. Don't Go Away is still a nice song though, and I feel it fits well in Oasis's career. There's not much on Be Here Now to get behind, but this song definitely was. The Gallagher brothers may forever be at odds with each other, but even in tumultuous times on a bad album can come a song that makes you feel happy you listened to it. May have to hear me out on this one because in the late 80s, Kiss was trying everything to stay relevant, both in trying their hand in different styles like hair metal and grunge. On the 1987 album Crazy Nights, yeah, swing and a miss. It was rough. Only the title track remains a song that the band will recognize years later. The title track Crazy Crazy Nights is the only song from the album that would continue to be played at live shows years later and after the album came out. Even Kiss realized that this was the only song worth hanging on to from '87. Or from most of that late 80s, early 90s period. Crazy Crazy Nights has a lot of elements that people love about Kiss songs. Fun choruses, hooks, sing-alongs, wild guitar work from Bruce and Paul. It's a fun track. The drumming by Eric Carr is also solid. It's definitely of its time in the late 80s with a heavy ballad style, but honestly, this proved Kiss could do that for at least one track. It's not a deeply written song full of insight, it's just a fun Kiss song, and that's meant to be blasted out loud in the car or something. Kiss would not play this song for years after Carr passed away, but eventually they brought it back to their live circuit. And honestly, Crazy Nights is not bad. It's just on a bad album that technically shares the same name. Kiss may have been desperate to try something new for an album, but oddly enough, on one of those attempts was a song that reminded us why Kiss is fun to listen to. Korn's discography is interesting in that the albums are quite good in the beginning and even in current years, but there was a big section in the middle of Korn's career that fans of the band don't really like to talk about. In the early 2010s saw a unique attempt at collaborating in the new dubstep fad with Skrillex called Path of Totality. That album was a mess, just a weird, digital, nonsensical mess. But there was one song that showed off what the group was actually trying to accomplish, and it actually working. Teamed with Skrillex and Kill the Noise, Narcissistic Cannibal combined the right rhythm and digital effects in mixing to work with the band's drum beat and instruments, while Jonathan David sounded strong. The single from Path of Totality, I feel, is what the entire album should have been. Rather, this is the quality of sound and writing the other songs on the album wanted to be. Narcissistic Cannibal is exactly what you expect in a Korn song with self-loathing and anger, but there is also a sense of turning things around and wanting to be better. The design and beat from Skrillex is thick, but it still works here. To be honest, I think this should have been a one-and-done single instead of a full album. Think about it, this song probably would have gotten praised much more if it was just a one-time collaboration instead of being a full gigabyte of digital noise and electronic distortion and nonsense jammed into one awkward album. Over the past 5 years, Korn have turned things around and proven they can still deliver on what their fans want. Whenever Korn wants to step out of their comfort zone in the future, maybe limit it to a brief experiment. This one hurts a little because Queen is legit one of my favorite bands of all time, and saying they have a bad album in Hot Space is a fair statement, or at the very least, extremely disappointing album. On 1982's Hot Space, however, came one of the best Queen songs of all time with the help of David Bowie in Under Pressure. When I made my list of top 10 best collaboration songs in rock, Under Pressure is number one, and for good reason. The song was quite chaotic to make as Bowie and Mercury and the rest of Queen were all at odds with each other while making the track on what they wanted, but the result was an instant classic. I honestly feel the only reason Hot Space wasn't completely abandoned was because of how good this one song is. The bass line is iconic, both Mercury and Bowie sound fantastic. It's a strong way to end an album. It's just a shame that back in the day, you had to go through a lot of blah to finally hear it. I feel Hot Space is Queen's most disappointing album, and they were oddly trying to not be Queen, and many of their strengths weren't shown. But when they did step it up and work with David Bowie, it almost makes the entire ride worth it, just to hear it at the end of the album. Under Pressure survived being on a weak Queen album and survived being abused by Vanilla Ice. Further proof and testaments to the staying power of one of the best collaboration songs in rock ever. Chinese Democracy is an album fraught with delays, band turmoil, millions spent, and a guitarist wearing a KFC bucket. The odds were stacked against Guns N' Roses when Axl finally delivered an album promising something for way too long. On an unfulfilling and disappointing album from one of the biggest rock bands of all time is a song that actually has many positive qualities. Better was a single from the album, and years back I didn't get why this would be the single, but looking in hindsight compared to other tracks on Chinese Democracy, yeah, I now get why this one would be highlighted. But looking past comparisons of tracks on the same album, the song Better is just fine. The track is just under 5 minutes, and Better is definitely a slow starter, but once things get rolling, you can hear Axl sounding good. A great guitar rhythm, it's solid. The verses sound like shades of Guns N' Roses from the 90s, while the chorus sounds like something wildly unique and from a different time. They made it work. I get why Chinese Democracy was paying over such a long wait and the insanity that incurred while recording it as a revolving door of musicians went through the lineup. If this album had more songs like Better, I think people would have felt differently. And also if Axl wasn't on again, off again crazy. Say what you want about Chinese Democracy, I know I have, but Better has a lot of emotion going through it and proved over a decade after their heyday that the name Guns N' Roses could still make a good song. I join the cacophony of rabble all asking The Clash the same question: what happened with this album? Yes, Cut the Crap truly embodies an album so bad that it essentially killed the entire band's career. The Clash did, however, get just one song that can stand out from a misdirected album. I like to trick myself by saying The Clash went out with This Is England, and on a slight high note, because if I really face reality and think about how Cut the Crap was the last thing the band worked on, then This Is England may not sound like a true 80s punk song on first listen, but I have to give credit where it's due. This track feels like a slow, anthem-style song with Strummer's heavy lyrics about the sad state of England that he sees and feeling victim of the British system. The sound is not a true punk, crash dance, quick, punchy song. It still is punk at heart, though. That sad chant of This Is England resonates you when you hear it, and think about what's being sang. Strummer said that this is the last great Clash song, and yeah, I agree with that. The way The Clash went out is sad, as it was a struggle over the direction of the music between the band members and the band's manager and the label. It's unfortunate that there had to be a last great song from The Clash off a terrible album, but the song itself still shines. There is a weird sense of unity thinking about Cut the Crap and how a majority of music lovers dislike it, but there is also an equally odd sense of agreement in that This Is England is a song worth going out of your way to hear. Remember Raditude, the Weezer album so bad that even the most die-hard Weezer fans facepalmed and refused to talk about it? It's weird to think that buried in such a mess of an album from a band just going through lazy motions is a song that really tried something different for themselves, and it worked great. It's weird saying that, but something good actually came out of Raditude in that awful Weezer era, somehow. Love Is the Answer takes influence from Hindi music and incorporates that into a truly meaningful song that is not phoned in like almost everything else on Raditude. Rivers Cuomo sounds believable and actually gives a message worth remembering, while incorporating a different style of music than Weezer would have ever come close to associating with before Raditude. The guitar work is peaceful, there is a sense of inspiration from Weezer of all bands, and you're glad that you heard it. Weezer took a chance with this and it worked. Not many bands could have pulled off a Hindi influence into alt-rock, especially at the mainstream level like Weezer, but they did it, and it's nice. It's up for debate which song is worse from Weezer's Raditude, but as for Love Is the Answer, I truly believe this one is something special from a band who's been around for generations now. No Lil Wayne required. Before we get to the final entry, if you haven't done so already, please hit the like button below if you've enjoyed this video so far. It helps a ton to prove to the YouTube algorithm that this is a video people are actually enjoying while they watch it, and that it pushes it to other people who aren't subscribed to the channel. Thank you. All right, time for the big one. To end this list, we have a moment of clarity off of the multi-platinum, grating, shrill Saint Anger by one of the biggest bands of all time, Metallica. And before some of you complain in the comments, "Wah, I love Saint Anger, you just don't get it, wah." Even Metallica laughs at how this album is not liked by their fans. They're aware of it. They know Saint Anger did not go over well with everyone. Get over it. On an album filled to the brim with horrific loose snare drums comes the song The Unnamed Feeling that honestly could add to many Metallica albums. Honestly, The Unnamed Feeling is the perfect example of a hidden gem on a bad album. The snare is not nearly as cruel here, and the build-up with the riffs is much stronger than 90% of Saint Anger. James Hetfield sounds more emotional and passionate in his performance too. I get that this was a tough time for the band when Saint Anger was made, but this track has different speeds and takes you on a journey through the song. The lyric writing is memorable in a good way, and it has a sense of clarity while in a dark time for the band. The quieter chorus somehow perfectly complements the heavy rip verses, and you can focus on it all from beginning to end. Saint Anger is one of the few albums that actually gave me a headache trying to listen all the way through, but The Unnamed Feeling works. It could have worked on other Metallica albums in the 90s as well. Metallica had a rough time making this album, but not everything on it was garbage. Just the parts that go clang, 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 clang. Sometimes a great band puts out a weak album. Sometimes a bad band can only put out bad albums. Even a bad album can have a diamond in the rough. The Unnamed Feeling describes that something shining in the rough that is Saint Anger. And that was a look at 10 good songs on bad albums. Know of any other good songs on a bad album? Leave a comment and let everyone know. Big thanks to my patrons and a special thanks to Brandon Barenfeld and Dom Smith. You can help support Rocked and have a say in upcoming videos through Patreon. Just $2 a month goes a long way to help the channel. Please subscribe to get notified on upcoming videos. You can check out my concert photography on Instagram, and you can keep up to date with Rocked on Facebook and Twitter.